It was a calm September evening in 2016 when the tranquility of Royce City, Texas, was shattered by a 911 call.
Oh, no.
My husband, he went to go help me. My Jeep is stuck in the back around the corner, and he's been shot in the head, please. That's my husband's blood.
Just breathe for me.
That's my husband's blood on me.
What's his name?
Robert Poynter.
The caller was Chasey Poynter, a 29-year-old woman whose frantic voice trembled as she reported that her husband, Robert Bob Poynter, had been shot. The terror in her voice was palpable, her words barely coherent as she described the horrifying scene. Bob, a seasoned firefighter, lay motionless on a desolate road, a fatal gunshot wound to his head. The question lingered, was this a tragic accident or the culmination of a sinister plot? Bob Poynter was more than just a firefighter. He was a local hero. Known for his bravery and dedication, Bob had spent nearly 2 decades saving lives and protecting his community. His reputation was that of a gentle giant, kind-hearted, non-confrontational, and always willing to lend a helping hand. In 2005, Bob had risked his life during the Hurricane Katrina relief efforts, solidifying his status as a man of integrity and courage. But behind the brave facade was a man struggling with personal demons, a man who believed in the sanctity of marriage even as his own began to crumble. Bob's first marriage to his high school sweetheart Amy lasted 19 years before it fell apart. Their separation was painful, but Bob found solace in a new relationship with a much younger woman, Chasey Tyler Mormon. They met through mutual friends, and despite the 18-year age gap, their connection was instant. Bob saw in Chasey a second chance at love, a new beginning after the heartbreak of his divorce. They married in 2009, and their life together seemed picture-perfect from the outside. A lovely home, a beautiful daughter, Addison, and a peaceful life in a charming town. From the outside, Bob and Chasey Poynter appeared to have the perfect life, a respectable firefighter husband and a devoted wife, raising a young daughter in a quiet, picturesque neighborhood. But the idyllic facade concealed a marriage crumbling under the weight of mistrust, resentment, and hidden desires. Over the years, the initial passion that brought Bob and Chasey together had all but vanished, replaced by cold indifference and growing hostility. The cracks in their relationship weren't just subtle, they were gaping wounds that festered behind closed doors. Bob, once filled with hope for a fresh start after his divorce from his first wife, Amy, had been captivated by Chasey's youthful energy and charm. However, the age gap that initially seemed thrilling became a source of friction. Bob, who was in his late 40s and set in his ways, struggled to keep up with Chasey's newfound zest for life. Chasey, nearly 2 decades younger, found herself yearning for excitement and attention, things she felt Bob could no longer provide. What had started as a whirlwind romance now felt suffocating, with both of them trapped in a cycle of unmet expectations and unspoken grievances. The tension between them escalated as Bob's health began to deteriorate. He suffered from low testosterone, a condition that affected not just his physical well-being but also his mood and behavior. According to Chasey, the medication he took to manage his condition made him prone to erratic outbursts, creating an increasingly volatile home environment. But Bob's friends and family painted a different picture. They described him as a gentle soul, not the aggressive man Chasey claimed. These conflicting narratives only deepened the mystery of what was really going on behind their front door. Chasey's dissatisfaction manifested in subtle but unmistakable ways. She began focusing intensely on her appearance, losing over 100 pounds and transforming her look. The weight loss wasn't just about health, it was a declaration of independence. She started spending more time away from home, frequenting bars, and reconnecting with old friends. Nights, once spent at home with Bob, were now filled with new faces and flirtatious encounters. To outsiders, Chasey was blossoming, but to Bob, she was slipping further away. As Chasey's behavior became more erratic, Bob's suspicions grew. His attempts to bridge the growing distance were met with indifference. He started feeling like a stranger in his own home, haunted by the feeling that he was losing his wife to a lifestyle that no longer included him. Desperate to uncover the truth, Bob took matters into his own hands. He installed a security camera at their front door, hoping to catch a glimpse of what Chasey was up to when he wasn't around. It didn't take long for Bob's worst fears to be confirmed. The camera footage revealed a steady stream of late-night visitors, one of them a man who would later play a pivotal role in Bob's fate. Chasey had not only emotionally checked out of their marriage, she was physically crossing boundaries that Bob had never imagined she would. Instead of confronting her, Bob internalized his pain, choosing to stay in the marriage out of a sense of duty and fear of disrupting their family. But Chasey was already planning her escape. The marriage had devolved into a game of psychological warfare, where each was trying to outmaneuver the other in a desperate attempt to reclaim control of their own lives. For Bob, this meant clinging to the hope that they could still fix what was broken. For Chasey, it meant finding a way out, no matter the cost. By 2016, the once warm and loving home had turned cold and hostile, with Bob and Chasey living like strangers under the same roof. Their daughter Addison became the only thread keeping their fractured family together, but even that wasn't enough to stop the downward spiral. Bob's attempts at reconciliation, including a last-ditch effort to save their relationship with a trip to Mexico, only served to highlight how irreparably damaged their marriage had become. When they returned, Bob confided in a colleague that he was done. The trip had confirmed his fears that there was nothing left to salvage. Little did Bob know that his attempts to keep the family intact were in vain. Chasey was already too far gone, caught up in a toxic web of infidelity, lies, and dark intentions that would soon explode into deadly violence. The seemingly small cracks in their marriage had widened into a chasm of betrayal, deceit, and ultimately murder. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, the cracks in Bob and Chasey's marriage only deepened, setting the stage for something far more sinister than anyone could have anticipated. Chasey's mind was no longer occupied with thoughts of reconciliation or mending the shattered pieces of her marriage. Instead, a darker idea began to take root, one that whispered promises of freedom and a new beginning. The idyllic suburban life that had once seemed like a dream was now a suffocating trap, and Chasey was desperate to break free. But divorce wasn't part of her plan. No, she had something far more final in mind. Chasey's relationship with Michael Garza, a truck driver with a rough past and a taste for trouble, was more than just a fling. It was an escape, a way out of the life she no longer wanted. Michael was everything Bob wasn't: young, reckless, and willing to do whatever Chasey asked of him. The two had met on Facebook, and their affair quickly turned from a casual dalliance into something far more dangerous. Fueled by the thrill of forbidden romance and a shared disdain for Bob, their conversations began to drift from sweet nothings to something far more sinister. Chasey's discontent with Bob evolved into cold calculation as she confided in Michael about her frustrations. To her, Bob was an obstacle, a reminder of all the things she wanted to leave behind. She spoke of him as if he were already a ghost, someone she no longer had to consider in her plans for the future. It wasn't long before the conversations turned darker, and the unthinkable became a tantalizing possibility. A plan began to form, hazy at first, but becoming clearer with each whispered conversation and late-night meeting. Chasey needed Bob gone, and Michael was more than willing to help. The plan was as cold-blooded as it was simple: lure Bob into a vulnerable position and eliminate him. There would be no drawn-out divorce, no custody battles, and no need for explanations. With Bob out of the picture, Chasey and Michael could finally be together, free of the burdens that had plagued them both. It was a chilling, calculated decision that reflected not just Chasey's desperation, but her willingness to cross moral boundaries she once would have never considered. On the night of September 9, 2016, Chasey put the plan into motion. She orchestrated a scenario that would seem on the surface like a tragic accident. Bob coming to rescue his stranded wife, only to walk straight into a deadly trap. She chose a desolate back road far from the prying eyes of the city, where the darkness would conceal the impending crime. To ensure Bob would come, she played the damsel in distress, calling him with frantic urgency, her voice trembling with fabricated fear. Bob, ever the dutiful husband, couldn't ignore her plea. Despite their fractured relationship, his instinct to protect her overrode any lingering resentment. Bob's drive to the remote, muddy road felt like just another night of dealing with Chasey's increasingly erratic behavior. He had no idea that every mile he drove was bringing him closer to a meticulously laid trap. As he navigated the treacherous path, Chasey was already waiting, heart pounding as she rehearsed her role in this twisted play.
What's going on?
My husband, he went to go help me. My Jeep is stuck in the back around the corner, and he's been shot in the head, please.
She knew exactly what was coming, yet there was no hesitation. This was the moment she had orchestrated, the moment she had dreamed of in those dark, quiet hours when she lay awake, plotting her escape from a life she no longer wanted. Bob's truck struggled against the thick mud, and eventually he was forced to abandon it and continue on foot, unaware that each step brought him closer to his doom. Chasey watched from a distance, her eyes fixed on her husband's silhouette as he approached. In the shadows, Michael Garza was lying in wait, his grip tightening around the cold steel of the gun. This wasn't just about killing a man, it was about taking control, about seizing the life that Chasey believed was rightfully hers. As Bob reached the Jeep, there was a brief moment of silence, a fleeting pause that hung heavy in the night air. Then, without warning, a gunshot shattered the stillness. The crack of the weapon echoed through the darkness, piercing the night like a dagger. Bob staggered, collapsing to the ground as blood pooled around him. Chasey, in a rehearsed display of shock, scrambled back into her Jeep, her mind racing even as her face contorted into an expression of horror. It was over in seconds, but the impact would last a lifetime. But this was no ordinary crime scene. The plot, which had seemed so perfect in theory, was far more chaotic in reality. Chasey's panicked 911 call.
She's pinging on Kenner at 2595, and she's extremely out of breath. She sounds like she's running.
Though laced with the right notes of desperation, couldn't mask the inconsistencies that began to unravel her story. The interrogation room was cold, bare, and intense, a harsh setting for the unraveling of a deeply twisted crime. Chasey Poynter sat across from the detectives, looking worn down, scared, and defiant all at once. She had stuck to her story that Bob's murder was just a random act of violence, but the detectives weren't buying it. Her version of events was full of holes, and the evidence against her was stacking up. They knew the truth was buried somewhere in her shifting stories, and they were determined to dig it out. To break her, they used every tactic they could.
It's stupid when we got married. I didn't want to be married anymore.
What do y'all fight over?
My daughter. He's trying to take my daughter away from me.
Why would he try to take your daughter away? Like, what reason did he
Because
give you?
he knows that that's what's going to hurt me the most.
They showed her photos of Bob, the smiling, happy man he once was, alongside the brutal images of his final moments. Each photo seemed to chip away at Chasey's composure. She shifted nervously, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route.
I really do love him. We've had a lot of issues in our...
But there was no way out. The walls were closing in. The detectives didn't let up, grilling her about her affair with Michael Garza, pointing out the lies in her account and questioning her about the mysterious figure she claimed to have seen. The more she spoke, the more tangled her story became. Her confident tone turned shaky, and the bravado she'd shown early on was quickly fading. It was only a matter of time before she cracked. Finally, after hours of relentless questioning, Chasey's resolve broke. She leaned forward, tears streaming down her face, though they seemed to come more from frustration than genuine sorrow. In a low, shaky voice, she uttered the name the detectives had been waiting to hear. Mikey? It was Mikey. She pointed the finger at Michael Garza, admitting he was the one who shot Bob. But this confession wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much darker truth. Chasey didn't just name Michael as the shooter. She slowly started to reveal her own role in the crime. She admitted that she had known about the plan from the start, that she had lured Bob to that lonely, muddy road on purpose. This wasn't just a random attack. It was a carefully plotted murder, driven by Chasey's desire to be rid of her husband. As the detectives pressed further, more of the disturbing details came to light. Chasey had manipulated Michael into pulling the trigger, convincing him to do the unthinkable in exchange for her love. She had coaxed Bob into coming to her rescue that night, exploiting his instinct to help, only to lead him straight into a trap. Even her frantic 911 call had been rehearsed to sound just right.
She's pinging on Kenner at 2595, and she's extremely out of breath.
Down to
like
the tone of fear in her voice. Throughout her confession, Chasey spoke with a chilling detachment, as if she were recounting someone else's story, not her own involvement in a murder.
I'm telling you, I don't know who pulled the trigger.
See, I think you do.
She detailed how she and Michael had planned everything, their alibis, their escape routes, and their lies to cover it all up. It was a cold, calculated plot, far from the impulsive crime of passion she initially tried to portray. As Chasey finished, the room fell silent. The detectives exchanged knowing glances. They had finally uncovered the truth. Chasey Poynter wasn't just a grieving widow caught in a tragic situation. She was the mastermind behind it all. Her confession exposed a heart so consumed by selfishness and greed that it saw murder as the only escape from a marriage she no longer wanted. In that stark interrogation room, Chasey's true nature was laid bare. It wasn't just about a failed marriage or a forbidden love affair. It was about a woman who had orchestrated a murder with cold precision, betraying everyone around her to get what she wanted. The chilling confession wasn't just a breakthrough in the case. It was a glimpse into a mind willing to deceive, manipulate, and kill for freedom. And finally, it was time for justice. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Reporters, family members, and curious onlookers filled every seat, eager to witness the dramatic conclusion to a case that had captivated the nation. The trial of Chasey Poynter and Michael Garza promised to be a gripping spectacle, a battle of narratives, each side painting a drastically different picture of what happened on that dark, desolate road. On one side was the prosecution, determined to prove that this was no random act of violence, but a cold-blooded, premeditated murder orchestrated by Chasey and executed by Michael Garza. On the other, the defense would attempt to rewrite the story, portraying Chasey as a victim of circumstance, manipulated by a dangerous lover. As the trial commenced, the prosecution wasted no time in laying out their case. They painted a vivid picture of a woman driven by greed, betrayal, and an insatiable desire to be rid of her husband. Prosecutors detailed how Chasey's affair with Michael Garza had gone from a secret romance to a deadly conspiracy, fueled by her desperation to escape her crumbling marriage without losing the financial security Bob provided. They played Chasey's 911 call, the fear and panic in her voice now ringing hollow against the backdrop of her confessions and mounting evidence. It was an eerie reminder of how convincing Chasey had been, until she wasn't. The evidence against Chasey and Garza was damning. Forensic experts took the stand, describing the blood spatter on Chasey's clothes, which indicated her proximity to Bob at the time of the shooting. Cell phone records revealed a trail of damning communications between Chasey and Garza in the days leading up to the murder, plotting and rehearsing their moves down to the finest detail. The prosecution's key witnesses, including friends, neighbors, and even Chasey's own relatives, testified about the state of her marriage, her volatile relationship with Bob, and her increasingly reckless behavior in the months before his death. Perhaps the most chilling testimony came from Bob's family and friends, who spoke of a man who was dedicated, loving, and utterly unsuspecting of the treachery unfolding in his own home. Bob's daughter, Natalie, took the stand and tearfully recounted her father's suspicions about Chasey's infidelity and his final failed attempts to repair his broken marriage. Her emotional plea to the jury was powerful. Bob was not the aggressive monster Chasey had tried to paint him as. He was simply a man trying to keep his family together, blindsided by a betrayal he never saw coming. The defense, however, was determined to shift the blame away from Chasey. They argued that she was a victim of manipulation at the hands of Michael Garza, who they claimed had acted independently and out of a misguided obsession. Chasey's defense attorneys painted her as a woman trapped in a tumultuous marriage, suffering under Bob's alleged violent outbursts and desperate for a way out. They pointed to her tears during the 911 call and her repeated claims that she never truly wanted Bob dead, hoping to sow doubt in the minds of the jury. They framed her confessions as the ramblings of a distressed woman coerced into admitting things she hadn't meant. Michael Garza's defense team took a similar approach, attempting to downplay his role as nothing more than a misguided lover acting on impulse rather than a calculated killer. They claimed Garza had been drawn into Chasey's web of lies and deceit, acting in a moment of confusion and misplaced loyalty. Garza himself remained stoic throughout the trial, his silence leaving much to speculation, but his demeanor was no match for the overwhelming evidence against him. In a dramatic twist, Chasey took the stand in her own defense, a risky move that many thought would either sway the jury or seal her fate. She sobbed as she recounted her version of events, claiming she never wanted anyone to get hurt, that she was just scared and confused. But her testimony quickly unraveled under cross-examination. The prosecution's lawyer pounced on every inconsistency, turning her own words against her. When asked directly why she didn't simply leave Bob if she was so unhappy, Chasey's stammering response fell flat. The jury watched as her carefully crafted image of a desperate, helpless woman disintegrated, revealing the cold and calculating person beneath. The trial was filled with tense moments, legal maneuvers, and shocking revelations, but the verdict seemed inevitable. After weeks of gripping testimony, the jury returned with a swift and decisive decision. Chasey Poynter was guilty of orchestrating the murder of her husband, and Michael Garza was guilty of carrying out the deadly plan. As the judge handed down the sentences, life in prison without parole for Chasey and 99 years for Garza, there was no mistaking the weight of justice finally served. Bob's family wept, not in relief but in sorrow, knowing that nothing could ever bring him back. Chasey remained emotionless as the sentence was read, her once dramatic tears now dried up, replaced by the stark reality of her new life behind bars. The trial of Chasey Poynter and Michael Garza was more than just the resolution of a murder case. It was a window into the darkest corners of human desire and betrayal. It showed how a seemingly ordinary life could be shattered by deceit, lust, and a complete disregard for another's humanity. The courtroom drama may have ended, but the haunting legacy of Bob Poynter's death lingers, a sobering reminder of the fatal consequences of playing with trust and life itself. The story of Chasey and Bob Poynter is a haunting reminder of the darker side of human relationships. It showcases how personal grievances, financial incentives, and troubled marriages can lead to tragic outcomes. Chasey's motivations, combined with the evidence and her confessions, paint a disturbing picture of betrayal and crime. As we reflect on this case, we are left with many questions about human nature and the lengths people will go to for personal gain. Chasey Poynter maintains that she never intended for her husband to die, but the evidence suggests otherwise. What are your thoughts on this disturbing story? Did Michael Garza act independently, or was Chasey's involvement central to Bob's murder? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this video engaging, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content. Until next time, stay safe and keep up with our channel for more intriguing stories. Thank you for joining us on this journey into a tragic and complex case. We'll see you soon with more captivating content.